this is the structure of this hour. I'm going to reflect my early career as a composer again, because that's obviously going to influence what I'm researching. Otherwise, I'd have a kind of schizophrenic life if I'm only doing this in my research and that with my music. Although, getting back to that Liverpool thing, people doing some forms of contemporary music or contemporary dance, for example, they go out to clubs at night and it's a totally different music and stuff. And they have a kind of schizophrenic life that's 9 to 5 and 5 to whenever. And you know, the people from the 5 to whenever don't know anything about what they're doing 9 to 5. And they don't even want to talk about it because they think I'm not going to understand it. Well, think about that. Not a good idea. Well, you can do it and you can survive it, but I just don't see how you're going to get enriched by having a double life like that. It's not ideal. So I'm going to go back to that time, and my focus was what I called experimental music. That term's not used that much anymore. People say innovative music or 100 other words, but experimental music is kind of time-stamped in the 60s, 70s, 80s, I think, where avant-garde existed before the Second World War. And then, as I said, I'll talk about curricula that I developed very briefly, and get into some early publications because they reflect how I kind of started as a young, early career person doing the kind of things I thought a university would want me to do. And then I started addressing issues that I thought were absolutely urgent, whether the university thought that was important or not, and there was no turning back after that. And there was a turning point, which was, if I remember well, about 1989, when Miles was just talking about a piece performed at the International Computer Music Conference in Korea. I was invited to one in Glasgow. I was in Amsterdam, so it was an international hop. Because I proposed the title is Computer Music Reaching the Public It Deserves, and I'll tell you what happened when I did it, because very, very interesting story that one. So, and because I did music yesterday, guys, it's only in my third talk today that there's any audio, so get used to my voice. I'm sorry, and those who were here yesterday will know I gradually and steadily lost it as the day went on. So I could still have it because there are a couple of pieces I'm performing this evening as well. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I think because of the informal nature, if there's something that's really kind of on your mind and you don't want to wait till the end, I won't mind an interruption today. It was a little bit different in the talks that I gave yesterday. So feel free if I know it's not the done thing, so if you feel awkward about it, we can talk about it in questions or informally when we get some tea afterwards. Just up to you. All right, so when I was undergraduate, years 1 and 2, I was very lucky that I knew somebody very well who was the son of a famous person on US television. And I don't know what they call it in South Africa. In the UK, it's His Master's Voice is the record label, but it used to be RCA as well, so I don't know which one you have. And RCA was the same company as NBC Television, which is kind of weird because that was just two different kind of media, but they were one. So this guy was the head of NBC News, which in US is like a mega job. And for some reason, as a perk in his job, he used to get every record that was produced by RCA, whether he wanted it or not. And his son was he was really into contemporary art, contemporary music, all the contemporary arts, in fact, just we'll put it that way. And he found a record shop in New York that had a deal. You give me the 2 promo records, and you can take 1 from our collection. And it was the biggest collection of new music in New York, if not the entire country. And he built up a record library that took up the whole wall, you know, way high. I don't know what the weight on the floor was, but and we're vinyl now, yeah? I'm that old. I mean, it could be very young with vinyl now, but everything in between kind of doesn't know about it. And I had a tape recorder and I was singing in a choir on a radio. I'll spare you the details of that. I was just trying to earn some money as an undergraduate, so I was on national radio singing songs people wanted to hear. And so I had my schizophrenic period as well. But they were throwing away these tapes, the large reels of tapes with a big hole in the middle. They were throwing them away after so many years with lots of splices in them and falling apart and about to turn to vinegar, who knows. And I don't know if anybody, any of the gentlemen out there have ever bought the Brute, the aftershave. It was a plastic bottle that was exactly the right size for these things to spin around. So I could get it to a small reel so I could use it on my tape recorder. And so I just copied record after record after record after record. And at one point, I knew more about 20th century music than the entire music department, I mean the professors, at Columbia University where I studied, which put me in a good position academically, just having that knowledge. And of course for me, the learning process. I mean, I had other friends, or I went to the library, and my knowledge of world music, and in particular African music, happened the same way. But that's another story for another day. So I had that record collection, which put me in an interesting position. And now, guys, from yesterday, I have to repeat the downtown schizophrenia that I had. The universities, except New York University, are uptown in Manhattan. And there was composition going on that was mainly atonal, very dissonant, very well thought out, very well crafted, using method, and not about anything, and not trying to communicate any emotion other than clinical. And that's where I studied, so I had some difficulties with that, which I shared to everybody yesterday. And downtown was just the biggest playground in the world of art, because New York City in the 70s was like where everybody came, and just unbelievable. And, a little known detail about what the hell, I was at Woodstock, okay? I may be the only person you ever meet. Dizu was so jealous when I told him that, I can't even begin to tell you. So that's my generation, all that. So you had all this popular music, and I was the radio critic for the university radio station. I was at the Fillmore East every week, seeing Hendrix and everybody else, poor me. But also going to wild music like John Cage and wild dance and wild new art, and wow! And I was told by my professors they hated that stuff. So like, how do I deal with this world of uptown, downtown, where we've got like a battle on? And there should be no battle. Like, everybody's trying to move forward in their art. Just get on with it and stop having competition. So that was a kind of atmosphere I was working in, and it was really not helpful for me developing what the hell was going on. And there was another factor. The Vietnam War was on, and I was of a certain age, where maybe I was going to get called up. Now, luck had it, I left the country, so it didn't matter. But I sent a lot of people out of the country as part of a little society at my university. You could go to Canada and you could go to Sweden, because those countries, bless them, felt that they should offer the people that were pacifist or against the war an alternative. So that forms part of the mix of who I was at this young age. And I'm not going to dwell on it, but when I had these super academics telling me about how music is made, and I had to do all that, there was other things going on in life and in the world that they weren't talking about at all. But I could die in that war. So how am I going to just write this music I don't want to write and ignore all that in the hope I just get through this time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a kind of a foundation which I'm not going to return to. So I focused on what I called experimental music, because I do believe that art is there to reflect society somehow, and not just to be of itself, which is not what a lot of people are taught at university. So we're already, and I think art is one of the best ways to move our world forward. You can sing a protest song, that's in your face. And more power to you, all the people doing that. But you can also do things in art, and especially I talked yesterday a lot about working in theater and with other art forms. And I've seen theater pieces that are so political, like, woo! And, well, what do we do in music? Because music is essentially abstract, and how are we going to deal with that stuff? So as an artist, I was confronted with that. As a student, I was confronted with that. And a future scholar, I was also confronted with that. Like, how do I understand this better? What can I look into to understand this better? And so on and so forth. But the word experimental, moving forward, that was me then, and that's me now. Nothing has changed as far as that's concerned. So, when I started writing, I was in my 20s. So I got, well, to continue the chronology, I was born in the US. I'm really seriously considering getting rid of that passport right now. If Trump comes in, then it's gone. I'm telling you, it's definitely bye-bye. And I moved to the Netherlands, which was this country where there were no poor people. Imagine. I mean, South Africa has gone through hell, and it ain't out the other end, and there are people that are struggling. Imagine a country where there are no poor people. Well, Sweden was one. I think Norway was one. I didn't go there then yet. And Netherlands was another one. There was a beggar on the shopping street of Amsterdam. Everybody knew him by his first name, because I'm sure he had welfare, but he was just keeping himself busy. No poor people. That's not the case anymore, by the way, but it was then. And to move somewhere where the government and the system allowed, some kind of equality after what I'd been through as a kid. So I moved to Amsterdam and worked at the University of Amsterdam for 15, 16 years. It became quite interesting to see in Europe that the public was a little bit bigger than in the US, but not really. And the only time new music really got marketed was when it was put in a fancy festival that was also doing like classical music or pop music, and some people would try something out, but there wasn't really a through line towards. So my issue, as I discussed at length yesterday, was that a lot of new music was being marginalized. And what was that all about? And I'm going to tell you what I actually discovered at the end of this talk, which is not that far away. So I would write articles considering why are there no people going to these concerts, what has caused it, without having thought through what the solutions were and how this had taken place. So they were more questioning articles, which you do when you're young, because you haven't figured things out yet and haven't completed that journey yet, or anything like that. But I did publish about, pardon me, radical figures, Marcel Duchamp, the Dadaist who really broke up art like crazy, who wrote 2 music pieces, one of which was called Musical Erratum, so, musical errors, which is a great title because it was all about random, 50 years before John Cage even thought of it. And so I found it interesting because he was like a guru in thought, but there were these 2 musical pieces, so I published about that. I published about Cage and his interest in anarchism. I published about the video artist Nam June Paik, Korean video artist, really radical figure, who actually went to conservatoire before he specialized in video art. And I wrote that one together with an art historian, so we hit him from both sides. Really, really interesting study. And a top electroacoustic figure in France, François Bernard Mache, which was a more traditional analytical survey of his work. But in that first area, marginalization, I had a series of pieces in something called Ear magazine that lasted for decades in New York, which was, it looked like a newspaper, but every radical musician wrote for it or put scores in it at one point, and I was actually a European editor for it for one time. And I wrote a series of texts called At a Fork on the Road. A fork on the road came to me through the Chinese Taoist thinking, which I'm not going to avoid right now, but it's something that really inspires me. But the idea was, let's keep our snobbishness going on and remain completely marginalized, or where's that other pathway and how do we find it? So that was me thinking out loud at the time. I also wrote about the fact that people that were making audio-visual works, again, I'm talking about electronic music, so most concerts were just recorded media, nothing to look at. And you could imagine the reviews in the papers. I just paid a lot of money to hear somebody push the play button and, and listen. I could have done that at home. Well, no, you couldn't. A, the loudspeakers at home ain't the same. B, when it's going around the room, try doing that at home at that time. It was an experience. So audiovisual artists add the eyes. The eyes are our leading sense, I guess, and suddenly big public. So you could get away with anything. And as I discussed yesterday about the work I did, I ended up doing theater pieces that were performed 100 times in a huge hall. They didn't come from me, but they ate up the music that I did. Whereas if I put it on a concert, the 23.7 people would have been there, and if it wasn't their style, they would have had something to complain about. And that's the culture that had been built up. Something was desperately wrong, and at one point I was going to hit it right in the head, but I wasn't quite ready to do that yet. And yeah, innovative curricula. It may seem odd to come from one continent to another to boast about curricula that you've written. But I think when you do take risks and do things people have never done before, it's worth sharing so you can think about it. So when I was at the University of Amsterdam, you need to know that in Europe at that time, before the famous Bologna Agreement, at a university you could only study the theory of music. At a conservatoire you could only study the practice of music. You really didn't get much theory, and you got no practice at the university. What an idiotic situation. And I heard the Minister of Education of France at a conference where I gave an important paper saying, oh, our system is perfect, we'll never change it. Well, the EU had a meeting in Bologna, and they said they got to talk to each other, they got to collaborate with each other. And what you do here at UCT, at SACM, and I know what's going on at Pretoria, and I'm sure elsewhere, is a much more holistic model, which the UK had, and US and Canada had, and Latin America, by the way, too. So, hey, yours works, that didn't. And I had to do something about it. So, number one, I created a major called experimental music. So already in the first year, at the end of the first year, you could opt into that. And number two, I fought like hell, and it took me a lot of years, but I got an analog studio because that's what people did at the time, and I got the first computer studio outside of the famous Institute for Sonology in education in the Netherlands. And so I started teaching synthesis and sampling and all that stuff as part of the major. They didn't get credits for composing because I wasn't allowed to. But nobody went through the course without doing it, because how can you talk about it if you've never done it? Like how these critics that write about concerts and they've never done it, where do they get the right to do that? Thank you, Miles, for your affirmation, because it happens all the time. And as if they know the blood, sweat, and tears that goes through the composer and through the performer to get to where we get in a concert. No, thank you. Just don't do it. If you don't know what you're talking about, get another job. So that's one thing I wanted to talk about. But when I went to Britain, and specifically England in 1993, so I'm jumping in the chronology, I went to an arts college. And so, no traditional subjects around. I think there was, it was arts and education. So there'd be music education along with music. And there was social studies for people that had to get an extra subject, but it was an arts college. And arts colleges can be all sorts, but there were two in the UK. One quite well known, and for those that know John Richards, he went there in his foundation degree, Darlington, which is now closed, which is a terrible, terrible shame, in the southwest of England, and Bretton Hall, where I worked for 4 years in Yorkshire in the north, where I had to learn English again because between their dialect and the dropping of the word "the" and stuff like that, what did you just say? And of course, I've been speaking Dutch for almost 20 years, so I'm getting back to English, and then with this dialect, where am I? Anyway, I was the first professor this college had ever had, and so they said, okay, you can write new curriculum. And I wrote, there was a popular music course, and there was a straight music course. And the popular music course, I said, you guys can continue, but I want to have cross-listed stuff, no silos, which is an interesting cultural mix, you all know that. And then I had a contemporary music's course, which means we're not sitting in the straitjacket of what people call contemporary music, but people can go their own way. And I wrote a curriculum which worked in blocks. Some things like theory or playing your instrument go straight through the ear, because how can you do it in a block? You know? Oh, I'm going to take guitar lessons 7 hours a day. No, you're not. The poor teacher's going to die to start with, you know. But other things, we would take themes. So we talked about like notating stuff. How do you create a representation of pop music, which often doesn't have a score, and graphic scores, and electroacoustic music. You don't usually make a score. You might have your Pro Tools session or whatever you use, and so on and so forth. So we talked about representation and mix these groups, and it was wild because you could just see the pop students just not wanting to engage, and by the time we got to week 5, they were totally in it. And these other guys thinking, why don't these guys just experiment a bit? Because originality is the last thing they wanted to do, and I used to challenge them. Well, why take a course if you don't want to be original? Just do it, or go to business school or fashion. Make your fashion. Just if you're not learning anything in music, why spend 3-4 years doing it, for goodness sake? This curriculum was so radical that when I put on a conference called Leaving the 20th Century, so you can guess when that took place, there was an Italian there representing the contemporary arts for the Italian government. And he went back and said, oh my God, you've got to see what they're doing there. And a year later, the Italian government sent 40 people, top professors, conservatoire students, university students, music school students, to see what we were doing. So I said, okay, come on, join me. It's 9 o'clock in the morning, and I go to dance class. Because that's going to keep me fit, it's going to energize me, and I've got a, pardon me, shit posture, and it's helping out a bit, and all that. And you saw these people studying, strings and whatever, standing on the wall, absolutely unwilling to engage. And I was a better person because I was doing dance, right? My musicians would come with me. They weren't as good as the dancers, but they had a lot of affairs with them. And they were just aware of their bodies, right? And they're performing. So sometimes you see a performance, what shall I say, ballet, sometimes in the opera, and they're singing about a big emotion, and they look like they're bored out of their wits. Why are they doing that? Why are they doing that? So through this kind of holistic approach, we did this stuff. And it was magic. It was magic. And so I've tried to continue to do this kind of thing. At the university where I'm at now, De Montfort, which is a partner with the SCAM, I'm pleased to say, we don't have a music department. We did, but somebody thought it was too expensive. So they said, reinvent yourselves. They invited me to come. And it's music technology with a specialization in sonic creativity with music production. We do have a course in music production. Why would we not? And okay, if they want musicians that we don't have, we go find them. We have a recording studio, you can do that. If you want to be trained to play in a string quartet, please don't come. There's 100 places you can go, and we don't offer that. But what we do offer is this rich world of sound, technology, and no one else was doing that. Here's one advantage. Can I quote you from my chat this morning?
Yes, please.
This lovely guy whom I met only last week has confided in me that the students doing this part of the music curriculum never meet or run into in one module, people on the other one don't know them during the whole 4 years here. What a missed opportunity. The people doing classical music should be shaken and learn that there's something else going on in the world, and you don't have to only play music of dead people. And the people in opera should get their egos sorted out and realize that is not the most important art form anymore, and if government stops spending money on it, it will be gone. And the people doing new music should not feel so awkward that they can't tell anybody what they're doing. You see what I mean? So that's the kind of atmosphere we're trying to create. And it's a happy family. Because I know it was no big secret. I just had to ask one question to one member of staff here. Are there tensions between the various constituencies in this music department? The answer was no. There are no tensions. There are major battles. So I'm trying to find ways to kind of combat that and have people celebrate the stuff that they believe in and believe in it themselves and so on and so forth. I move on. So in '89, as I said, I was actually invited to the ICMC, which for talks was a rarity. I just tossed an idea around with the person that was running it that year, and I said, I'd like to give a talk about whether we're getting the public that we deserve. I went, wow. Okay, do that. We're going to set up a special session for that. So they headed it up, you know, reaching audiences, computer music. And normally, as Miles knows, you have a lot of parallel sessions, and there's about, well, depending, you know, 40 people in this one and 12 in that one and so on and so on. I had 250. And I talked about why is it that we're all developing all these things, all working our heads off, producing new music, spending so many months making a piece, and if musicians are involved, so many seconds rehearsing it, and then not getting concerts in the end. What's going on? And then I left half the time for discussion, which you don't do. I was given more time, but half the time for discussion. And the person running the conference says, we're going to do a second session on this, which is never done at ICMC, and invited, for those in the know, Jean-Claude Risset to join me, because he was a major, major, major figure and a delightful gentleman with a totally open mind, who had worked in the most powerful institutions in our field in America and in Europe. So we did a round table that lasted 2 hours, and it could have gone on all day. Everybody was troubled by this. Nobody was talking about it. Which made me think, okay, at a fork on the way, we're going to now look into the fork on the way. And in 1991, I completed the book which is called What's the Matter with Today's Experimental Music? That's putting a mirror up on my career and saying, why is this happening? Experimental music too rarely, organized sounds too rarely heard. To cut to the quick, number one, the broadcast media. Enemy number one? No. Enemy number two. Broadcast media. How many hours a week on South African radio can you hear innovative music? Günther, none.
Zero.
Zero. Okay.
Zero.
Well, we've got 1 hour and 15 minutes in the UK, so I'm going to do a quick calculation for you. 1 hour and 50 minutes every week in the UK. If you gave every UK composer a go during the 1 hour and 50 minutes, they would get 12 seconds each every year. However, there are composers who compose music outside of the UK. British citizens are not aware of this because they live on an island, but it's true. There are people outside of the UK who compose. And if you put those composers in the mix, you get 2/3 of a second a year. If you write a 5-minute piece, you might get one performed in your life. How the hell did that happen? Why does nobody care about living music? What was this? And that was the radio. What about the medium that everybody does have to do with? The telly. None. Okay. Oh, and now the newspapers. When do they write about new music? Well, they write about it after the concert that you can't go back to. What's the point to get a review about something you're never going to hear? Okay, you're younger than I am, and you can, because they do put it on Bandcamp and SoundCloud and Spotify putting this kind of music on. You must be joking. I know about 5 pieces on Spotify that I could classify as the kind of music that I make. So you need to know where to look. And if you don't know where to look, you can't discover it. And furthermore, if you don't have a parent or a teacher or a friend who takes you there, you can't find it. So that was enemy number 2. In consequence, there was enemy number 3, education. No, I don't mean the university, although the struggles of Miles and Theo and Merrill, I can't tell you. Merrill at the moment has such a well-defined contract that the 3 pieces of hers that we're going to hear right now were made in her free time because she can't teach it at the moment. Where has the world gone if you've got a jewel like Merrill? And, you know, that's not, because contractually and this, that, and the other thing, because they don't have enough space, because they don't, and they say, well, we'll give more staff if you get more students. Well, yeah, right, how are you going to get them in here? And you're in a vicious circle. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the schools below. How many schools in South Africa, I would assume in this case possibly private schools, will introduce this stuff to teenagers or kids? No, no. There was an A-level exam in the UK with a 20th century music piece. When my daughter went to school, there was a thing about Stockhausen. So take the most difficult, one of the most difficult composers, and get kids to start with that. Not gonna work, not. And it's so easy, as I will make clear as we get into the second talk today, it is so easy to make that happen. And I have worked with kids. I'm spilling the beans already for something for the second talk. I have worked with kids. I've made e-learning for kids. I've made software for kids. And guess what? Making music with sounds? They all love it. All of them. No exceptions. The ones that have the most trouble making music with sounds are those who are studying an instrument and are already locked into the discipline. But those who don't, wow, I can do that? Woo! Yeah, it's like playing. Yeah, but we do play music, so there's nothing the matter with it. The enemy number 1, the musicians themselves. Who did you write your music for? Oh, I believe anybody can enjoy my piece. I just hope that they engage with it. And what are you doing about that? Hoping I get another concert to have a performance. So what are you doing about that? Well, what am I supposed to do? A hell of a lot. If I think, you know, if you want to make this music relevant, do something about it. And most musicians, I'm sorry, are too arrogant to get involved. Why did I move from beautiful Netherlands and the most beautiful city ever, Amsterdam, to the UK with its crazy politics and it's an island, etc.? Because they were doing community music, what you call here outreach, and they were doing brilliant stuff. And I needed to learn more about that, so that was where I was going to do it. And that's why I ended up in that place. And I have no regrets, because it's ubiquitous, and it made me do big projects later in my life. So that was me complaining, that one. But complaining is only half the work, isn't it? You then have to practice what you preach, or do something about it. So this is the same publisher as you can see on the bottom. It's extinct, but it's Routledge now. And I wrote a book called Experimental Music Notebooks. And Bretton Hall, that art college I mentioned, it was in Yorkshire Sculpture Park. So this is a picture of a sculpture, which looks like an African drum, only it's about 10 meters high, in the sculpture park, which I just thought was beautiful and relevant. Music, sound is everywhere. This is where I'm working, handshake. This is written for people who are just interested in maybe getting into this stuff, and teachers. And did I do a music education course? No. Do I know how to instruct teachers what to do? No. But I can try to get them really interested through nurturing them through what is possible making music with sounds, or even making experimental music with instruments. So I was reached a point on a pathway where, yes, I can continue to write articles about famous radicals and this, that, and the other, but the main thing I need to do is address the problem that's at the core of why new music went nowhere. And by the way, yesterday in the first session, there were 6 of us. And this is 50 years later from when I started realizing there was a problem. And it's not South Africa, it's still a problem. It is still a problem. I would love those of you doing music production who really groove on new technology and in popular music to be able to engage with some of this stuff and say, you know, that's really interesting. What I found really a major moment was when techno started going and clubs started going, and you'd have this IDM, intelligent dance music, that started with sonic stuff. So yeah, there's sonic stuff for about 20 seconds up to a minute, and you think, ooh, what's that? And then boom, boom, boom came in, and guess what? We start playing. But hey, what's this? Is this a warm-up? Or are you trying to clean out your brains, or trying to get some clarity? Well, that was electroacoustic music you were playing right there, and there are hundreds and thousands of people enjoying that. They may be looking forward to the boom, 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 but they were taking that in too. So what was the matter with that? Why did you put it in the first place if you're not interested in it? So we're not like that. We are not like that. In the second session, I'm also going to talk about what I call the sound-based music paradigm, big word, but you have a body of knowledge about note-based music, whether you're doing pop, jazz, classical, traditional African, whatever, because there are things about note-based music that hold together and that we understand. In sound-based music, there's a lot of information that we have just named cut and paste. Yeah, you don't cut and paste for guitar. You could now, but you know what I mean. That's not what you learn at the conservatory. But you all cut and paste in one way or another if you're using technology to work, as a video artist does, and so on and so forth. So this opens up this world of knowledge and the broadest horizon of creativity you can imagine. Yesterday, I think I mentioned it briefly, and I know I did in the class last week. Soundscape music, where most of the sounds are recorded on location. Acousmatic music, where you have sounds that you recorded or generated, but you mask them to an extent that you're hearing sound, texture, timbre, but not identifying what the sounds are. You have noise music. You have sound installations. I mean, I could go on and on and on. I've got a list on the website. It's got 90 entries in it. That's how much is out there. And like, where are these communities of practice and these communities of interests? Well, that's going to be the subject of what comes next. So I'm going to stop there in this first talk. But you can see that I'm kind of a funny guy, but he's also kind of angry and disappointed. So I've written 10 books and another 90 articles. I can only get one piece out a year of music. That's how much of a headache and a labor of love that is. You know, okay, it takes a woman 9 months, it takes me a year. But these things have come and come and come because there were lots of invitations. Why? Because I was asking the question that people were not addressing. And without addressing that, we're not going to get anywhere. And one of the reasons I did it, the last sentence, Theo, is I studied ethnomusicology, which is the study of music as a cultural phenomenon. And those doing new music, and to an extent, those doing popular music, were ignoring culture. How can you? How dare you? You didn't do that. So I've ended up doing that. End of first talk.